Nick. How are you doing today?
I am outstanding, Amy. How are you doing?
I'm just telling you, we were talking about this before the show, but time zone changes, dateline changes. I just wish we could pick one. Actually, we could be on universal time. We all just know what time we are.
Well, that's exactly what China does. The entire country is on one time zone.
It makes a lot more sense than what we've been doing, I'll tell you. So we're later than we normally are. We'll figure this out now that we've adjusted our days and it's spring forward and everything. But we've got a lot to cover. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is, so Kristi Noem is no longer the Secretary of Defense. She's become the Shield Maiden of the Americas. What
Secretary
exactly is the Shield of Americas?
It was Secretary of Homeland Security, not Secretary of Defense.
You are correct. We don't have a Secretary of Defense anymore because we renamed it to Secretary of War.
Well, technically, by law, it's still the Secretary of Defense. He just wants to play act, but I digress.
We've got to stop changing the names. Just like Shield of Americas. What is this? Is this something out of the Marvel universe?
It sounds like somebody's been reading a lot of comic books, and I will admit that I thought it was a meme when I first heard the term. But no, it's a real thing. The President Trump, and he was joined by Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, and Kristi Noem, the new special envoy to the Shield of Americas, yesterday to kick the things off in Florida. So we have a new organization that's ostensibly there to coordinate counter narcotics, counter drug, counter crime across the hemisphere. And there are, I think, about 16, 17 countries that have signed on to this initiative. And I will say, on the face of it, if it sticks to its enumerated objectives, it is absolutely a good thing. It's certainly disingenuous to say we've never done this before. We've been working with the Colombians on countering drugs and cartels for a very long time now. But anything that we can do to help institute the rule of law anywhere where it's weak is an absolute good thing. It will help them, and it will help their neighbors, and it will help us. What I fear is that, and you heard some of Trump's remarks about how he's going to go after Cuba next during this conference. I fear that it's going to turn into more of a dictatorial, imposing U.S. Ideals and policy on some of these countries. And for Cuba specifically, I mean, he's certainly telegraphing what he wants to do, which gives the Cubans a lot of time to prepare. But there's still the same thing, that the same issue that we've run into in Iran that we'll get to in a few minutes. There's no organized opposition. There is opposition to the Cuban regime, but it's not like a single entity that is just ready to step in and take the place of the Communist Party if it were to just disappear tomorrow.
So it's a lot about Cuba on the show and how what's the situation is with Cuba, their power situations. And a lot of people weren't aware that at the same time as we are having our operations over in Iran, we also have a partnership agreement, and we have went into Ecuador. Do you want to touch on that at all?
So the Ecuador thing, and this is what the Shield of the Americas can do positively in the hemisphere for partners that are willing to sign up. We share intelligence, we share training and tactics and techniques and procedures, and potentially even assist them on operations against some of the more powerful cartels and drug gangs. If we can root out some of this organized crime that is very endemic in a lot of these countries, it will. I hope it will be a positive impact in Ecuador, and I hope that will be a positive impact in these other countries that have signed up. So that's the sign of what it can do for the good. As long as we don't just take it as something that we are now imposing U.S. policy and U.S. ideals on these countries.
So lots of things going on there with the Shield of Americas. It really does sound like it's straight up out of a Marvel comic book. Nick, you're aware of my obsession that we talk about all the time behind the scenes, and going to talk a little bit about this, which is this article came out last year. And I constantly say, if you want to know what we're really doing out there, take a look at this map and look at how Trump, Putin, and Z could carve up the globe. And this was put out in Newsweek, which is not a fringe source, by any means. And Newsweek goes in to describe what this map could look like. And so let me see if I can get to it without too many pop-ups. Gotta love cyber. And this goes into this whole concept of the DonRoe Doctrine, which is very, much related to what we've been discussing. I think in the Shields of America. So, what are your thoughts on this? As I find this map.
So the notion of the spheres of influence has been much discussed since Trump came to power first in 2017, and then his second term beginning in 2025. There's a lot that a lot of his policies or his actions, I would say, rather than policies, kind of lend themselves to this sort of construct. In that he does not show a particular interest in anything European other than making sure that the European Union and European NATO allies spend more on defense, which again is not a bad thing. And he has expressed some concern about Chinese influence in Latin America. So that suggests that he doesn't consider Europe to be in America's interests, while he considers Latin America to be absolutely in America's interests. Where it runs into a little bit of trouble is when you start talking about spheres of influence. Who decides where these lines are drawn, and that's the conflicts really start to flare up at those points. And you look at what we've specifically done in the Caucasus to kind of facilitate peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. That has traditionally been very, very Russian oriented. And to say that we're trying to take a step into those regions is impinging upon what would be a Russian sphere of influence. And then China would certainly take issue with a lot of our actions in Southeast Asia and the East China Sea and South China Sea, with some of the countries there, saying that we are impinging upon their sphere of influence in that region. So it's not a clean argument. There's a lot of stuff to lend itself to it, a lot of actions that lend itself to a sphere of influence argument, but it's not a black and white. It's not a yes and no, off and on sort of thing, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I love that we can agree to disagree on this one. As you're aware, I am very much thinking that, hey, this is really something that is going on that we should be paying attention to at a minimum. But we've kind of buried the lead. We wanted to talk about this because everybody else is what's going on in Iran and what's going on out there, as we are talking about. Despite this spheres of influence and what's going on in Western Hemisphere, is really Iran is the big show right now. Yeah,
Iran, and I don't want to become the Iran show. And there are so many voices talking about this one. I don't want to just be one more voice in the chorus. But there is a lot to discuss because there are bombs falling and people dying, and it is a big deal. So recently, the Iranian president has come out and apologized to his Arab neighbors for attacking them. I could armchair general about Iran's approach to this conflict, but the bottom line is they did attack commercial sites and industrial sites in a lot of Arab countries. And it has run the risk of drawing those Arab countries into open conflict with Iran. That is not something Iran wants. Now, I also think that this apology is kind of masking. He's trying to say, hey, we're going to back up on our volition. Part of it is absolutely the fact that they've lost a lot of capacity. So the number of missile and drone strikes is already way down. They've probably exhausted much of their inventory, the pre-conflict inventory, and I suspect that production has been severely impacted by our actions. So part of this is him trying to save face. Oh, we're choosing not to attack you by choice, not by the fact that we don't have anything to shoot anymore.
Great points there. Let's talk a little bit about, some people are saying that this has been to free women. At the same time, if you're looking at regime change, this doesn't appear to be a pro-women's rights regime change.
No, it doesn't. There's a huge issue here with what exactly are the goals and objectives. They've never been clearly defined. I think Trump's most recent statement is that he wants unconditional surrender on the part of the Iranians, and he wants to have some say in the appointment of a new Iranian leader. Now, what exactly he means by the first statement is still ambiguous, because unconditional surrender, while it sounds pretty black and white, it is in the eye of the beholder. There is some subjectivity to it, and he's not clarified that. As far as having a voice in selecting the Iranian leadership, I don't see anyone that has any sort of influence in Iran accepting that right now. He has said he's not going to go with the Kurdish option of sending in armed Kurds to try to influence the outcome of the fighting there. So that leaves a huge open vacuum as who's going to fight this on the ground. But I do want to go back. I don't want to lose the point you made about this being about women's freedom and probably freedom more generally. While he said that as one of his statements of objectives early on, along with destroying Iran's nuclear capability, installing a new leader, and a few other things, it's really not. I find it disingenuous. If that were the case, why would you go after Iran for oppressing their people and not so many other countries that do the exact same thing, like Saudi Arabia, North Korea? You can point to Cuba, Russia. So if that is what your objective is, where exactly does it end? Because it can't really end with Iran. I guess it can, but would it logically? I don't know. What this whole thing goes to show is that there's no clear objective here. This is still the administration is decided to launch an offensive operation, an air campaign, almost exclusively an air campaign against Iran because we can, and we're spending billions of dollars, doing literally billions of dollars. 7 Americans have now died. They announced the 7th today. For what? And that the American people haven't been given that answer. And I'm as an American citizen, that frustrates me.
And Nick, I want to pull this a bit deeper. The first show that we did 5 weeks ago, we discussed the national security strategy that had just come out at that point. I mean, it was actually the national defense strategy, which is embedded within the national security strategy. The national security strategy only had 3 lines about Iran. And those 3 lines basically said we have declared victory from last year when we had done operations the year before. They walked that back a little bit when they did the national defense strategy, which still didn't talk deeply about Iran. And also, as you and I noted, didn't talk about cyber. Now, the national cyber strategy, for those of you who don't know, just dropped on Friday. I've done a pretty intense analysis and putting that article out tonight, which should be out tomorrow morning. And really, once again, we're not addressing Iran in cyber. Iran has always been listed as one of the top 4 cyber adversaries for the United States. Back in 2023, Iran demonstrated it could hack into U.S. water supplies. When they did that, they had some measures of control. So what they did is they just put little splash pages showing they could hack in to demonstrate this. We know right now that from numerous sources that Iran is operating on bank systems, hospital systems, etc. And yet the national cyber strategy does not talk about U.S. critical infrastructure. Do you think we are leaving ourselves vulnerable in the United States, in the homeland, in the critical infrastructure area, particularly in regards to cyber?
Yeah, absolutely. So this new cyber strategy that dropped is 4 pages long. So that right there tells me that it's not a really big priority for this administration. When you talk about specifically critical infrastructure, that's one of the biggest issues. I think if we were to come in conflict with China, or particularly over Taiwan, that's probably what they would do. Is they would hit our critical infrastructure. They would target our airports and our rail yards to slow our logistics capability enough so that they could clean up anything that they wanted to in Taiwan before we would able to even have a chance to deploy. So the fact that we're not seriously addressing this, and it's a good thing that Iran doesn't have that sort of reach, because, and then by that I don't mean cyberly, because they can through cyberspace, but I mean kinetically. If they did, then we would be in a lot more trouble. If we had to deploy forces and they were looking at trying to sabotage us domestically, we would be in trouble.
And Nate, this is what concerns me as somebody who's worked on the electric grid, as well as in FAA task force before in cyber, is that this is really something that this administration appears to be fighting wars from last century, not from this century, as well as when you look to the partnership that we have now with Zelensky and drones, which is a lot of irony in that situation. I think we have just enough time to touch on that. Yeah,
so you say 20th century, I say mercantile economic mindset. And then the DonRoe doctrine that you referred to is really, like I said in the very first episode, a resurrection of the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which was early 20th century. So to me, his thinking is late 19th century, not 21st century. That's how I think that he perceives the world. Maybe there's some nuances that I'm missing, but through all of the actions that he's taken, that's the assessment that I make.
Nick, I wish we had more time to discuss this, and I didn't even ask you, what are you drinking today?
I have a Manhattan. That's my go-to cocktail when I don't know what else to drink.
I love that you have that. And everyone, thank you so much. Please like, please subscribe. Please let us know other topics. What we're doing is just picking out what happens to be the current world events every week, and appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
Cheers.